the, like you mentioned earlier, Antonio, the kind of 246 corridor is dominated by sandy loam soil, and in this one section of our vineyard, this is definitely clay. It's hillside. It faces due west, so it just gets pounded by the cold Pacific Ocean wind. Every row has its own elevation, its own exposure. So when we talk about, we've all kind of mentioned it, so far about, the wind, the cold, the soils. Matt referenced golf ball sized clusters. I mean, what we're talking, thicker skins, we're talking about light yields, right? And that's what we're all experiencing up here. And it's really difficult to pull off, a business, right? When you're working with such low yields and you're reliant, 100% on Mother Nature. And when you talk about what creates those low yields, we're also talking about then, this gravitational pull here, right? There's not a lot of liquid. We don't get a lot of rain in general. The clusters here in this block, I have 5 clones in this block, and I have 3 of those same clones planted elsewhere in the vineyard, and the cluster weights are all different. So in the terraces, we're talking about, little pine cones, like tiny berries, thicker skins, really intense fruit. You guys could walk through the vineyard with me at harvest time and be like, whoa, what's going on here? Like there's something different. You can visually see the difference. It doesn't take, a UC Davis graduate of enology to figure that out, right? The other thing too is worth noting here, it's neutral wood. The barrels that I use are 15 to 25 years old. And then it's also 60% whole cluster. So it's kind of fun to see this Pinot Noir and this lineup here without any new wood and also with whole cluster. Do you do whole cluster too? I do. So all these wines have whole cluster, is that right? Which is really cool to think about. There's a devigorizing effect in Santa Rita Hills. And when you have that, you farm it right, you can actually get your stems ripe. And when you do, the benefit, for the wines in terms of aromatics and structure is hugely appreciated. I'm a big fan. I've been doing it from day one. And so that's really what makes this wine unique, I think. And could I go into the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we put them in this order, because you're one of the few estates where there's both Pinot Noir and Syrah on the same property. And Syrah, to me, is kind of like the dark horse of the Santa Rita Hills. And Rome varieties are becoming more and more planted. So
yeah, I mean, it's fun. I remember, Sashi and I had a conversation like maybe 15, 20 years ago about, we should all rip out our Pinot Noir and plant it to Syrah. There's something really unique about Syrah in our area. And again, we talk about degree days. We talk about an early bud break. We talk about, the average daytime high during summertime is 73, 74 degrees. That's really cold, right? Again, if you farm it right, you got to drop the fruit. Syrah is a late ripening varietal. It's prolific. It carries a lot of fruit. So you got to manage it. You got to farm it. That costs money. It's not easy. It's risky. The closer you get to winter solstice, right, you're decreasing temperature, sunlight, and you're increasing the threat of inclement weather, right? So it's pretty dangerous, right? It's really risky. Having said that, we end up picking our Syrah in the middle of November, right? It's really late. This wine sits in pure sand, which is another really cool thing about it. It's 2 clones and it's 100% whole cluster. So we're just waiting and waiting for the seeds to get ripe, the stems to get ripe, the skins to give all their color, all the aromatic compounds. I mean, everything is moving really slowly, and it's a huge advantage for all of us as winemakers to be able to grow fruit in these kind of conditions, right? I think that the reason why there's not a lot of Syrah planted in these truly cold climates is because if you have that beautiful climate, you're gonna plant it to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and that's what we did. We did that too, right? But we also took a little risk in planting some Syrah. And since then, back in '97 is when my brother and I planted the vineyard. We've added to our Syrah acreage, which is really fun. Kind of, I guess we got lucky, and then we figured out what we were doing, and now it's like kind of taken on its own thing now. So, just really pretty lifted, white pepper, lavender, violet with acidity. When you taste this wine, you feel that acid, that freshness, which is really unique. Syrahs can be big and bold and grippy and very masculine. Like this is kind of like turning down the volume a little bit and hearing things that you couldn't hear when it was so loud. So it's fun, small production, 4 acres, I think like 800 cases.
So the question is about climate change, and you mentioned vintage 21 and 23, but broadly, how should we be thinking about climate change and its influence on the Santa Rita Hills?
I think, to some degree, our proximity to that massive Pacific cold ocean is what is regulating our area, specifically Santa Rita Hills. I think as you go further east, you start to kind of lose touch with the ocean, and you start to fall into more global warming typical characteristics, right? So until that ocean decides to change temperature, we're pretty set for a long time. The mountain range, obviously, we got a lot of tectonic activity in California. So who knows, but for right now, we're good there too. But I think where we see it is not so much in, heat. We see it kind of in higher lows, right, which is really important. Dormancy. What's really important about a cold winter is that it kills off a lot of disease, a lot of insects, a lot of things that need to be killed off, right? And we're right there on that border. And then also, not necessarily lack of rain, because like you mentioned, we've had a lot of rain the last 2 years, but it's when we get the rain and how much. I mean, we normally average around 10, 11 inches a year. Last year we had 35, right? So I think it's less global warming, climate change, yes, but then you gotta also pay attention to the low temperatures as well.